Well, hello. This is Dan Arth, and for the next 1 hour, I will be reading from the April 29th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the front page, Education. Province eyes stricter school phone ban. As in Quebec, devices would be off limits until end of day, minister says. Article by Kristen Rashawai. Ontario students could soon be facing an all-day ban on cell phones at school, with Education Minister Paul Calandra saying he doesn't want kids to have access to their devices even during lunch or breaks. Looking to Quebec, where students are not allowed to use their devices until classes are over, Calandra said he's going to spend time talking to education officials in that province to see how they have and what the results have been where they have implemented that. In a telephone interview, Calandra said anecdotally it seems to be very, very positive, even with the students who initially were a bit skittish on it, but then now have come to actually like the fact that they don't have access until they are off school property. In the fall of 2024, Ontario prohibited the use of cell phones for students in kindergarten to grade 6, while those in grade 7 and up must put the devices away during class time, but can use them during lunchtime and breaks. At the same time, the province also clamped down on social media, saying boards had to ban access to Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat from all networks and devices. Students and teachers have told the Star that focus and learning have improved under Ontario's rules, though others said they saw no difference. The Canadian press has reported a positive response to Quebec's stricter rules. In both provinces, exemptions are made for students with special and medical needs, and teachers can allow phone use for educational purposes. In Quebec, the full ban began last September to cut down on distractions in the classroom and help kids focus amid a growing body of research on the harms of increased screen time. Calandra will be in Quebec for an education ministers conference in June and said the kind of rules he's considering would mean students could have phones in their lockers or backpacks, but they just won't be able to take them out unless they go off school property. On Tuesday, Calandra, who was in the London area for an unrelated capital funding announcement, also said the province is expecting to boost attendance counselors to help address widespread absenteeism, in addition to making attendance and participation a mandatory 10 or 15% of all final marks in high school. Well, he said he plans to consult on the changes. Exemptions will be made for students with special needs and for situations out of kids' control, such as transportation issues or inclement weather. However, Calandra noted parents should not be taking their kids out of class for any extended vacations beyond what's already allotted in the school calendar. And while school-related sporting events are okay, kids should not miss class for outside tournaments for hockey, soccer, or other sports. He clarified, kids in competitive sports typically take part in 3 or more each year, starting on a Friday and often out of town. My tolerance of that is reduced, Calandra said in the interview, adding elite athletes can get special accommodations, but you've got to start putting a premium on kids being in school when they can be, and it's just too easy to pull them out. In Ontario, just 40% of high school students are meeting attendance standards, which means being in class 90% of the time. That's the equivalent of about 19 days away. Any more than that is considered chronic absenteeism. This is a big problem, right? He added, "We'll have to put some additional resources into attendance counselors so that we can get to some of the root causes of what's going on, but we're not backing down on this." University of Ottawa expert Tracy Vaillancourt has noted that poor attendance is linked to lower academic achievement and poor outcomes, and that students' most cited reason for missing school is sickness, followed by medical appointments, parents allowing them the day off, being too tired, or being on vacation. Vaillancourt, an education professor, notes that in Scandinavian countries, families are not allowed to vacation outside of the school breaks, and adds, as a high-performance coach of a provincial under-17 soccer team herself, the priority should be attending school and not tournaments. And moving over to our next headline story, windfall helps trim deficit. Liberals boost spending on training, tax relief amid higher federal revenue. Article by Alex Ballingall and Tanda McCharles. New lower deficit, same budget fight. Heralding the anniversary of his Liberal government's election win with a new spring economic update on Tuesday, Prime Minister Mark Carney found himself in the familiar position of fielding allegations of reckless public spending from the right and claims from the left that the federal government is falling short on delivering aid Canadians need. The economic statement booked a lower budget deficit but used the bulk of a new $60.3 billion windfall achieved via lower expenses and higher revenues combined to pay for widespread sales and gas tax relief, a new $6 billion program to train trades workers, and a $25 billion plan to finance a new sovereign wealth fund. Carney's finance minister, François-Philippe Champagne, brandished the budgetary statement as fresh evidence the Liberal government has put the country on firm fiscal footing, hailing indicators of an economy weathering the storms of troubled trade and international uncertainty with enough spending firepower to support Canadians struggling with rising inflation. With private sector forecasts predicting a stronger than expected economy, the government notched a lower deficit figure for the fiscal year that ended in March, hitting $66.9 billion, down from $78.3 billion projected in last November's annual budget. The budget shortfall in the years ahead is essentially unchanged, $65.3 billion this year, declining to $53.2 billion in 2030-31, while its size compared to the overall economy is projected to drop from 1.9% to 1.4% over the next 4 years. Today, we're restoring fiscal discipline. These are serious times, and Canadians expect prudent fiscal management, said Champagne. We've been able to make the tough decisions that are needed, he said, after describing Tuesday's update as a bridge towards the long-term direction that includes a plan to double non-U.S. exports and rewire federal spending toward capital investments over operational expenses. It's a long-term vision for Canada and the practical steps we need to take right now. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre panned the new figures as worse than the previous Liberal government that took office in 2015 under Justin Trudeau, accusing Carney of telling Canadians to hold my champagne while he racked up an 11th Liberal budget on the national credit card. Today, we got more costs, more debt, more taxes, and more on the national credit card, Poilievre charged, calling for lower taxes and regulatory changes to speed up resource development like infrastructure for more fossil fuel and other exports. Avi Lewis, the NDP leader, came at the update from the opposite angle, calling it a missed opportunity. Lewis said the government failed to come up with new programs that would actually make people's everyday lives better, and sharply criticized the Sovereign Wealth Fund. This government is creating a fund with tens of billions of dollars of public money to benefit these massive private projects that will make huge profits for already profitable corporations. We should be investing that kind of money in the economy of care, where Canadians work and actually take care of each other, Lewis said. Tuesday's update showed revenues are projected to be $36 billion higher over the next 5 years than the 2025 fall budget projected. Government officials who briefed journalists credited the increase to stronger than expected economic projections, which boosted forecasts of personal and corporate income taxes. Another factor is the oil price shock that rocked the global economy after the United States and Israel launched their war on Iran in late February. Since the oil and gas sector is a major part of the Canadian economy, increased prices can add billions to the federal coffers, even if they create economic pressure if they persist, the update said. Expenses are also now expected to come in lower, including lower than forecast public debt charges and lower unemployment benefit payouts. The government also expects to spend less on a tax credit for businesses investing in carbon capture, utilizing and storage technology. That's because Ottawa is allowing a claim for the tax subsidy for enhanced oil recovery, a process to inject greenhouse gases underground to squeeze out more oil, which pays out a smaller tax break. A government official explained more businesses will likely use this method, hence the drop in expected public subsidies. In presenting the update in the House of Commons, Champagne said 2/3 of the new revenues outlined in the fiscal update will go to affordability measures that make a real difference in the lives of Canadians. That includes about $14.2 billion over the next 5 years, slated for already announced cost of living relief, including the expanded sales tax rebate and the suspension of the federal excise gas tax from April 20th to Labor Day. New spending includes almost $5.5 billion over 5 years to recruit and train up to 100,000 new skilled trades workers to build projects in federal priority areas like housing, resource infrastructure, and military industries. Another $1.97 billion is earmarked for Canada's long-standing operation to train Ukrainian soldiers, while $958 million over 5 years will go to repair and maintain small craft harbors across the country. Citing a consensus among all the provinces and territories, the federal government said it will shave down Canada Pension Plan contributions from 9.9% to 9.5%, a change that will save an employee with a $70,000 salary $133 per year, with their employer saving the same, the fiscal update said. Other changes include the revival of a controversial proposal to give police powers to search Canada Post mail deliveries, a move to streamline applications by disabled people for federal supports, and $755 million for national sporting organizations and facilities. In his speech, Champagne did not refer to the U.S., nor did he mention President Donald Trump or the trade war he triggered. But at his press conference earlier in the day, Champagne extended sympathy to workers in sectors hit by the Trump tariffs, including steel, auto, aluminum, and more. And he said the government is striving to get a trade deal with the U.S. that will help them. Champagne framed the government's latest measures, which include borrowing to set up a $25 billion sovereign wealth fund announced Monday as a necessary response to sudden and unprecedented changes in the world. From geopolitical shifts to supply chain disruptions to rapid technological breakthroughs, including in artificial intelligence, the world is changing quickly, and Canada must adapt to thrive, he said. Champagne was unapologetic about the paucity of new spending measures, saying the watchword for this update was discipline. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Moving over to sports, Crosby shining under pressure. Penguins captain has found his game with team on brink of elimination. Article by King Jemison. Sidney Crosby whipped in a one-timer and raised his hands in the air. It was subtle, the kind of celebration you do when your team is trailing 3-0 in a playoff series. But with the opening goal of Game 4 in Philadelphia, Crosby announced his presence in the series, and he hasn't looked back. With the Penguins on the brink of elimination, their captain has been the best player on the ice in each of the past 2 games, racking up 4 points and dominating nearly every shift. Pittsburgh has cut the Philadelphia Flyers' advantage to 3 games to 2, heading into Wednesday's Game 6 at Xfinity Mobile Arena. When things get hard, when backs are against the wall, there's no doubt in my mind that Crosby is going to lead the charge in terms of elevating and finding a way here to do everything possible to help this team win a hockey game. Penguins coach Dan Muse said after his team's 3-2 victory in Game 5 Monday at PPG Paints Arena, and you've seen that the last 2 games. No player in NHL history has more goals and points against the Flyers in both the regular season and playoffs than Crosby, but he was uncharacteristically quiet in the first 3 games of this first round series. He had just 1 point, a secondary assist on a power play goal in Game 3. But with the season on the line, Crosby came to life. In Game 4, his first goal of the playoffs gave the Penguins an essential 1-0 lead. His second point Saturday was even prettier. He won a battle along the boards, kicked the puck to Chris Letang, and screened a Flyers defender so that his longtime teammate could rip home a third-period goal that was the game winner. Crosby expressed confidence the Penguins had found their game with that win, and from the first puck drop of Game 5, he played like a man possessed, or perhaps like a man who wasn't ready to see his 20 years with Evgeny Malkin and Letang come to a close. Malkin's future in Pittsburgh beyond this season is unclear, so Monday could have been his last home game as a Penguin. Malkin will don a Pittsburgh uniform at least one more time, largely because Crosby took Game 5 over immediately. Crosby is now tied for the series high with 5 points after consecutive multi-point games. He's getting to his spots. Now the series shifts back to Philadelphia for Game 6. Crosby, Letang, and Malkin have been here before. In a 2012 first-round series, they fell behind 3-0 to the Flyers before rallying to force Game 6, in which they were routed. Every series is new, Crosby said when asked about the 2012 parallels. You try to rely on experience to some extent, but it's new groups, different situations. The last couple games, we found our stride a bit. In our next article, staying in sports, Blue Jays, zeros on the board. Savage isn't overpowering in first start, but he's over the moon to be back. Article by Gregor Chisholm. There was a lot of uncertainty surrounding Trey Savage entering his season debut. The Blue Jays right-hander was coming off 4 underwhelming rehab starts in the minors, which gave the appearance that more time would be required before he rounded into big league form. Apparently not, because those concerns have been alleviated. The 22-year-old rookie wasn't at his best during the first official start of the year, but few pitchers are, and he was still sharp enough to get the best of a divisional rival. Yasevich scattered 4 hits and did not walk a batter across 5 1/3 scoreless innings during Tuesday's 3-0 victory over the Boston Red Sox. While there's still some rust that the product of East Carolina needs to shake off, he appears ready to once again become a full-time member of the Jays starting rotation. Very happy with that performance, Yasevich said. A lot of zeros on the board and gave us a chance to win. It felt the same as last year. First time back, this was my opening day. The emotions were through the roof. It wasn't clear that Yasevich was ready to face big league hitters again before Tuesday. He made 4 rehab starts, 2 with Class A Dunedin and 2 with Triple A Buffalo, and experienced mixed results. There had been a pair of 1-run outings and 2 others when he couldn't get out of the 3rd inning. Yasevich's last rehab outing for Buffalo was arguably his worst. He allowed 4 runs on 2 hits while walking 4 and striking out just 2. He went into that game hoping to get his pitch count up to approximately 85, but he had to be pulled midway through the 3rd after tossing 64. The command was much better against the Red Sox. Yasevich threw 50 of his 74 pitches for strikes, and he didn't walk a batter. He stranded a pair of runners at third base during the first 2 innings and then did not allow another runner to reach scoring position. I was very happy with my fastball location, said Yasevich, who went 3-1 with a 3.58 ERA and 6 appearances during last year's playoffs. I was able to spot it on the corners, up and down. I know I broke a lot of bats tonight, so that's as good as a strikeout to me. The one critique about Yasevich's first outing is that there wasn't much swing and miss early on. The Pennsylvania native is known for his strikeouts, especially after recording 39 punchouts during 27 2/3 innings of last year's postseason. That element of his game was largely absent against the Red Sox. It took Yasevich until the 4th inning before he got his first strikeout, and he finished with only 3. He also generated just 5 whiffs from the Red Sox bats, 3 on his splitter, 1 on a fastball, and 1 on a slider. That ratio will need to be much higher in the future, but it shouldn't be alarming for a pitcher still rounding into form. He's going to have to do that sometimes, Jays manager John Schneider said. There are going to be days when he gets some strikeouts and days when he doesn't. But I think that overall he pitched really well. No walks, and he got better as the game went on, which is encouraging too. The other positive coming out of Yasevich's return was how he finished after escaping jams in the 1st and 2nd innings. He responded with a stretch that saw him retire 10 of the next 11 batters. Despite entering the game with a limit of approximately 80 pitches, he got into the 6th inning deep enough to pick up the win. Yasevich walked off the field to a standing ovation after striking out Wilson Contreras. He came back the way he finished the season last year, said Jays first baseman Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who went 2 for 3 with an RBI single and a run scored in the victory. That's him. The Jays hope that Yasevich's return will coincide with a return to form by the entire team. After watching a lot of key players go down with injuries throughout the spring, they are starting to get healthy again. And moving over to the business section of the Toronto Star, McDonald's taps drinks craze. Chain to launch new lineup of crafted sodas, refreshers, and iced coffees. Article by Tara Deschamps. Your next drink order from McDonald's Canada may come in a frosty cup all but glowing from its fluorescence, or brimming with a layer of foam thick enough to give you a milk mustache. The fast food giant is reimagining the drink menu you grew up with in favor of a new roster launching May 5th. It will keep the classics, pop, coffee, tea, milk, and juice, but position crafted sodas, fruity refreshers, and foamy iced coffees as a new permanent cornerstone. The focus on fruit, froth, and carbonation is meant to tap into a category the chain considers to be the Canadian quick service industry's fastest growing, and turn McDonald's into a restaurant people think of for more than Big Macs, fries, or nuggets. We want to become a beverage destination, McDonald's Canada President Anne-Marie Schwintek told the Canadian Press. Instead of a drink next to food, it's more like, if you want a beverage, think about us. If it works, the strategy will lure in a younger generation that lets social media guide eating habits and push those less beholden to the scroll toward trendier beverages that can supercharge profits. It will also place the company in more direct competition with Frappuccino, Haven, Starbucks, and Tim Hortons, which has long sold iced caps and more recently introduced fruity quenchers, energy drinks, and fancier iced coffees. Swintech knows her company has been slower to the punch, but maintains it was because the chain needed to intensely study consumer preferences and figure out how best to cater to them. Sometimes we're a little bit late to the party, but I think we are the best guests of the party, she said. The first of the new menu stars are crafted sodas, drinks with pop as a base, flavored syrup mixed in, and foam on top. They will come in combinations like Sprite Berry Bliss, Orange Dream, and Creamy Strawberry Coke. The drinks, often called dirty sodas, were popularized by the secret lives of Mormon wives. The reality show's cast members frequent U.S. dirty soda chain Swig because Mormons don't drink alcohol, coffee, or tea, but can have pop. The second menu tent pole will be refreshers, lemonade-based drinks mixed with mango, pineapple, watermelon, blackberry, and passion fruit flavors. They sometimes include freeze-dried strawberries or pearls that burst with juice when popped. The final cornerstone is iced coffees in flavors like French vanilla and salted caramel and topped with cold foam. The new drinks will range from $2.49 plus tax for a small iced coffee to $4.19 before tax for a large refresher or crafted soda. The company's drink pivot didn't come overnight. It launched spin-off restaurant Cosmix in 2023 to test specialty lemonades and teas, blended beverages, and cold coffees. In Canada, it sold Sprite with blue raspberry syrup this past February as part of a collaboration with Drake's brand OVO. The new drink menu is an evolution of those pilots, appealing to everyone from Gen Z to soccer moms pressed for time and hooked on fountain pop or iced coffee, said Searchlight marketing founder Cindy Syracuse. While she wasn't briefed on the Canadian announcement, a recent McDonald's U.S. menu reveal earlier showed many of the drinks will also be sold south of the border. Syracuse thinks they'll squeeze extra cash out of cost-conscious customers and those increasingly critical of meal combos that have crept well north of $10. McDonald's has responded by freezing the price of a small cup of coffee at $1 for at least a year and dropping McValue meal prices, which have small sandwiches, fries, and fountain drinks, to $5 for the same duration. It will soon bring its $1 soda and iced coffee promotion back for the 17th summer in a row. Now the franchises will say, okay, I can offer my $5 value meal because I've just picked up this incremental profit from the dirty sodas. Syracuse said, it's a very, very smart strategic move on how to build penny profit and build your margins. In our next article in the business section of the Toronto Star, last call for the Toronto Festival of Beer. Organizer Beerlicious filed for bankruptcy this month, saying it owes creditors more than $2 million. Article by Josh Rubin. It's closing time for Toronto's oldest and biggest beer festival. The company which runs the Toronto Festival of Beer has filed for bankruptcy, leaving behind more than $2 million in unsecured debts to festival vendors, Scotiabank, and two companies run by GFL Vice President Ted Manzares. Beerlicious Inc., owned by festival founder Les Murray, filed for bankruptcy April 13th, owing $2,007,361.26 and listing just $8,087.13 in assets. according to a notice to creditors prepared by MNP Debt Solutions, which was appointed as bankruptcy trustee. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. According to licensed insolvency practitioner David Lewis, who's not associated with the Beerlicious case, creditors almost certainly won't be able to collect anything at all. They are unlikely to get anything, said Lewis, a partner at BDO and a member of the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals. The trustees' fees will eat up that $8,000. First, the biggest single creditor listed in the notice to creditors is Scotiabank, with a line of credit debt of $451,365 and $78,094.23 owing on a credit card. Two companies with Manzares listed as the sole director are owed a total of more than $500,000. Manzares-controlled Casey Corp is owed $477,995.06, while Manzares-controlled Soltana Capital is owed $46,510.80. Casey Corp's headquarters was listed in Manzares' home, which was shot at along with the home of GFL CEO Patrick Dovigi in September 2024. A man was charged this month with the shootings. Manzares declined to comment for this article. In a text message, Murray blamed the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and shifting consumption patterns for the bankruptcy, which will go before a formal meeting of creditors Thursday. Moving over to world news. King points to historic ties in speech to U.S. Congress. Article from the Associated Press. King Charles III marked the 250th anniversary of American independence from Britain with gratitude that the two countries united to build one of the most consequential alliances in human history, while urging that we ignore the clarion calls to become ever more inward-looking. Speaking on Tuesday to a joint session of the U.S. Congress, Charles repeatedly highlighted the historical and cultural ties that he said have cemented an enduring bond between the United States and the United Kingdom. But even as he spoke in unifying, optimistic terms, he delivered a series of nuanced warnings encouraging leaders in the U.S. to remain collaborative and engaged in global affairs. He said the alliance between the U.S. and the U.K., tested anew by President Donald Trump's war in Iran, cannot rest on past achievements. Charles urged unyielding resolve in backing Ukraine against Russia and heralded the NATO alliance that Trump has consistently undermined. The king praised religious pluralism and interfaith dialogue in terms that are rare in Trump's Washington. As the White House rolls back regulations aimed at denting climate change, the king encouraged those in power to reflect on our shared responsibility to safeguard nature, our most precious and irreplaceable asset. At one point, Charles traced the notion of checks and balances on executive power to the Magna Carta, the foundational legal document sealed by King John in 1215. Trump told the New York Times earlier this year he was constrained only by my own morality. And acknowledging a scandal that has roiled politics in both the U.S. and U.K., Charles subtly alluded to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender with ties to British officials, including the King's brother, Andrew. Charles is on a 4-day visit to the U.S. intended to both celebrate American independence and to repair the country's fraying relationship with the U.K. He hardly arrived in Washington as an oppositional figure to Trump, joined by Queen Camilla. Charles had a warm greeting with the President and First Lady Melania Trump at the White House earlier Tuesday. In his welcome remarks, Trump also highlighted the shared history between the two countries. American patriots today can sing, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty," only because our colonial ancestors first sang, "God save the king, Trump said. The leaders met privately in the Oval Office for a meeting Trump later described as really good, adding that Charles is a fantastic person. And staying in world news, next article, UAE says it is leaving OPEC. Article by John Gambrell and David McHugh. The United Arab Emirates said Tuesday it will be leaving OPEC effective Friday, stripping the oil cartel of its third largest producer and further weakening its leverage over global oil supplies and prices. The UAE's decision had been rumored as a possibility for some time as it pushed back in recent years against OPEC production quotas it felt had been too low, meaning it wasn't able to sell as much oil to the world as it had wanted. Having invested heavily in expanding energy production capacity in recent years, the bigger picture is that the UAE has been itching to pump more oil, Capital Economics wrote in an analysis. The ties binding OPEC members together have loosened, it said, particularly after Qatar withdrew from the cartel in 2019. Regional politics are also likely at play. The UAE has had increasingly frosty relations with Saudi Arabia, OPEC's largest producer, over political and economic matters in the Mideast, even after both came under attack by fellow OPEC member Iran during the war. The UAE's withdrawal from OPEC won't necessarily have any immediate effects on markets. That's because world oil supplies are sharply constrained by the war in Iran, which has closed off the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway through which 1/5 of global oil supplies, including much of the UAE's, is transported. On Tuesday, Brent crude, the international benchmark, traded above $111 US a barrel, or more than 50% above its pre-war price. OPEC accounts for roughly 40% of the world's oil output, but its market power had been waning in recent years as the U.S. ramped up production, while Saudi Arabia had been producing more than 10 million barrels of oil a day before the war. The U.S. pumps more than 13 million barrels per day. And staying in world news, war in Ukraine. Kiev claims thousands of drones downed. Article by the Associated Press. Ukraine used interceptor systems to shoot down more than 33,000 Russian drones of various types in March, a record monthly figure since Moscow launched its all-out invasion more than 4 years ago, Ukraine's defense minister claimed. Meanwhile, Ukraine's domestically developed long-range attack drone struck a Russian oil refinery and terminal on the Black Sea for the third time in less than 2 weeks, prompting the evacuation of local people and a Russian warning of possible environmental consequences. Ukraine has developed cutting-edge and battle-tested drone technology that has proved essential in holding back Russia's bigger army and has drawn military interest from around the world. Interceptor drones, as part of a comprehensive air defense system, are now being sought by Middle East and Gulf countries amid the Iran war, Ukrainian officials say. Ukraine is scaling up supplies of interceptor drones to thwart Russian aerial attacks, and its military has introduced a new command within the Air Force to boost the country's capabilities, Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov said in a post on Telegram late Monday. Turning now to local news. Man charged in fatal Mississauga shooting. Suspect 70 turned himself in after what police are calling a targeted incident on Monday. Article by Raju Mudar. A homicide investigation stretched across 2 locations in Mississauga and Thornhill on Tuesday as police investigated a shooting that took place on Monday morning. Howard Brodsky, 70, of Thornhill, has been charged with first-degree murder. He reported himself to police and was arrested Monday, Peel police said. Emergency services located a 62-year-old man with multiple gunshot wounds inside Spy Depot security near Kennedy Road and Matheson Boulevard shortly after 8:30 a.m., according to Peel Police. Paramedics were unable to make life-saving interventions and the man was pronounced dead. Police said the suspect had fled the area but later confirmed that an arrest was made and a firearm recovered. Enough evidence has been gathered to determine that this was not a random act but a targeted incident, spokesperson Constable Lori McCann told reporters in a media scrum later Monday. I have no information on what the cause of the shooting was. It's very early in the investigation, McCann said. There were 2 Peel police cruisers still on scene at the plaza Tuesday, and Spy Depot security was cordoned off. According to its TikTok page, Spy Depot sells devices such as cameras, audio recorders, GPS trackers, and home surveillance systems. On Tuesday, while police investigated the store, residents went about their business at the plaza, including at the busy restaurant next door. Workers in the area were reluctant to speak to media, but a few said they knew the victim and he was well liked and he patronized other local businesses, including a nearby physiotherapy clinic. Meanwhile, across the GTA in Thornhill, several Peel police cars surrounded a home on King High Drive, which was cordoned off with caution tape. Uniformed Peel police officers and detectives could be seen outside and entering the home with boxes. A large flatbed truck took possession of a Land Rover that was parked in the garage, and Peel police confirmed the home was part of their investigation. Linda Benjamin, who lives across the street from the house, identified Brodsky as a resident of the home and said she saw police arrive to arrest him. The police came with their guns drawn, she said. Benjamin said she provided security footage to the police and spoke with a detective who told her they wanted to determine when Brodsky left and returned home. She said Brodsky was a jeweler who was a nice guy. The family was known to love animals and had 6 dogs. Brodsky made an appearance at a Brampton courthouse Tuesday and remains in custody, police said. In our next article, local news, locals to get early jump on rec center registration. City program will be offered at all 37 locations this fall. Article by Mandis Hababinia. The city is expanding a program that allows residents who live near a community center offering free programs to register 1 week ahead of the general public. Last summer, to prevent those living outside of neighborhoods from taking up spots before locals get a chance, especially low-income residents, the city started rolling out early local registration at some in-demand community centers. By this fall, locals living near all 37 free centers will be able to register early, too. Free centers consistently experience high demand for registered programs, and some local communities have historically faced challenges accessing available spaces, said a staff report released Tuesday. In 2024, city data showed 65% of people registered for programs at Regent Park Community Center lived outside of the neighborhood. Scarborough Centennial Recreation Center had the most non-locals registered at 85%. Early local registration, which council approved in 2024, started at 6 free centers last summer and expanded to 10 more locations in lower income areas this winter. According to the report, the proportion of locals registering at recreation centers increased from 36% to 65%, while registrations by locals, specifically from lower income areas, increased from 57% to 65%. The city's already approved 2026 budget includes $2.18 million for the citywide expansion, while staff are projecting about $850,000 will be needed next year to sustain the program, according to the report. Beginning in 2028, the annual operating cost is estimated at about $700,000. A separate evaluation report said while non-locals were displaced, many registered at paid recreation centers instead, rather than leaving city programs altogether. Some said in a city survey They then experienced increased travel distance, affordability challenges, reduced access to preferred activities, and a loss of familiarity. Residents can check their eligibility online using their address. The report said Torontonians' eligibility depends on their catchment areas, and the city considers factors like population size, physical and natural barriers like arterial roads, ravines, waterways, and travel corridors, while prioritizing nearby lower income areas and community or subsidized housing. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And staying with the news, our next article, Ottawa moves to boost skilled trades. Federal government announces $6 billion program to help recruit, train, and hire new workers. Article by Mark Ramsey. The Carney government is betting big on boosting the workforce for its Build, Baby Build agenda with a new $6 billion program to recruit, train, and hire new workers in the skilled trades, with an eye on making a dent in high unemployment among young people and enlisting 80,000 to 100,000 new workers into a push to build housing, major infrastructure, and defense projects. The Liberal government headlined its spring economic update Tuesday with the launch of the new Team Canada Strong program. The proposed end-to-end strategy will support young people with funding for recruitment, wage subsidies for placements and apprenticeships, upgrades to training facilities, reforms to certification, and bonuses for getting certified. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne touted it as a step change in terms of how we're going to approach skilled workers in Canada, and argued it would pave the way for a strong pipeline of the workers needed to turn plans for nation-building projects into a reality. This is not just an incremental measure, Champagne told reporters. If you look in the recent history of our country, I don't think we've approached trades training in such a comprehensive way. Citing a slow and challenging process where opportunities run out quickly, employers are often reluctant to take a chance on inexperienced workers, and trainees struggle to make ends meet. The update said the new program aims to halve the time it takes tradespeople to get certified to work across Canada. It commits $2 billion over the next 5 years for recruiting and subsidizing entry-level placements for Canadians under 30, while matching employers with recruits and giving them up to $10,000 for apprenticeship salaries. Another $331 million will go toward training with an eye to introducing online exams, harmonizing apprenticeship numbers across the country, pending buy-in from the provinces, and boosting funding for labor unions to expand training capacity and get new equipment. The biggest portion of the funding, $3.4 billion, will go to $400 weekly income top-ups for apprentices taking mandatory training classes to make up for lost wages, and a $5,000 bonus for those who obtain their certifications. The program will also include a pathway for trades workers to go into the Canadian Armed Forces with a $250 million investment. NDP leader Ave Lewis told reporters it appeared to be a promising program and a sizable investment, but said the devil is really going to be in the implementation, while urging the Liberal government to get weigh-in from trade unions. There need to be hard strings on that money, he added, making a reference to the Ontario Skills Development Fund controversy. Canadian Labour Congress President B. Brisky also called it a smart investment in the future of our country. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, in a lengthy House of Commons speech, largely critical of Tuesday's fiscal update, slammed Canada for having the lowest investment per worker in the G7, but said nothing about the newly announced program. In making the case for the massive public funding for the program, the government stressed the dire shortage Canada is facing when it comes to workers in skilled trades, arguing the country will need more than 1.4 million additional workers by 2033, far more than this program aims to achieve. The need is urgent, but long training processes and financial pressures on apprentices contribute to low rates of completion, the update said. If nothing changes, Canada will face a persistent gap of more than 20,000 skilled workers per year. According to Statistics Canada, new apprenticeship registrations reached a record 541,000 in 2024, but the certification rate was only 19.9% that year. Our next article, Opinion. PM focused on the here and now. Article by Susan Delacourt. Let me make it real for you. In that one short, sharp sentence, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne acknowledged the political juggling act that Mark Carney's government is trying to pull off as it embarks on its second year of power. It is a government that boasts it's delivering long-term change to Canada, but one that is also keen to assure Canadians that it can also come up with short-term, quick fixes for their affordability struggles, the real stuff. So in the mini budget unveiled on Tuesday, exactly 1 year after Carney's Liberals won the 2025 election, there was a lot of reassurance that the short term remains in this government's sights. We have ensured that as revenues have grown, 2/3 of this increase over the past year have been directed toward affordability measures that make a real difference in the lives of Canadians, Champagne said in his statement to the Commons. Though the Carney government now has a majority, which gives it some flexibility to plan for the longer term, it's telling that it feels this need to say that 2/3 of its focus, revenue speaking, are on the here and now for Canadians. In the opening pages of the Spring Economic Update, which touts the mission of the Carney government to turn from reliance to resilience, it essentially acknowledges the juggling it's doing. Some of the biggest long-term payoffs of this transformation will take time to be felt, it says, before insisting that a main purpose of this newest economic statement is also in providing a boost today and a bridge to a better tomorrow. This is emerging as a schism between the ruling Liberals and opposition Conservatives, with Pierre Poilievre escalating his criticism in recent weeks on the Carney government's inability to deliver tangible results in any meaningful timeline, whether that's on the trade war with the U.S., balancing the budget, or reducing taxes. Poilievre has come out swinging, too, on the whole swath of major projects, saying they're just pipe or pipeline dreams for now, and calling the high-speed rail proposal a far-off pie-in-the-sky scheme. This dovetails with another consistent line of attack from the Conservatives, depicting Carney and his government as anti-populist, more interested in governing for corporate boardrooms or global elites. You could read the rollout of this mini budget as a bit of a reply to that criticism. A week ago, the Prime Minister took to YouTube to personalize his outreach to citizens, a move a senior strategist said was an attempt to kick off an ongoing fireside chat conversation with ordinary citizens. Then on Monday this week, Carney and Champagne rolled out something billed as a sovereign wealth fund, essentially a tool to encourage investment in Canadian projects and industries. It is part of the new measures in the spring economic statement, but it was deliberately unveiled a day in advance, presumably so the government could use Tuesday's full rollout to highlight the affordability measures. That was ample evidence of the government doing the juggling between long-term and short-term, between macro and micro ambitions. Monday was the big picture. Tuesday was supposed to be all about the small picture. Champagne, talking to reporters on Tuesday in the so-called lockup, definitely encouraged this reading of why the Wealth Fund had been split off from the rest of the economic statement. We know we have a strong economy, but we need to help people where they are now, which is affordability, he said. We're building the country for long term growth, and at the same time, we need to build stronger communities. Champagne cited some of the measures to increase employment in the skilled trades as a measure for the here and now. In a way, all governments struggle with this juggling act, but this challenge lands for Carney's liberals precisely at a time as the spring economic statement kept reinforcing when the world is in uncertain times, whether that's because of Donald Trump's tariffs or the war the US and Israel started in the Middle East. The fog of uncertainty was how Champagne put it on Tuesday. So there's heightened demand for a federal government to persuade citizens that it isn't powerless in the face of all this global turmoil. Moreover, though, the Carney government is only 1 year into its mandate. The Liberals have been in power 11 years, and ask any move it makes runs the risk of being more of the same. It will be up to the Canadians to judge in the weeks and months ahead whether this spring economic statement is tangibly delivering on affordability. But Champagne made sure to pepper his speech with 7 references to what's real, and people should probably expect to hear this government making this a refrain: let me make it real. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 29th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader today has been Dan Arth, and I thank you for listening.